Hello, this evening we're going to talk about the cerebrum and its functions.
The cerebrum is made of two hemispheres. Together they account for about 83% of the total brain mass. Entire surface is covered by sulci and gyri, ridges which increase surface area. Deeper grooves are called fissures. Two main fissures are the longitudinal and the transverse cerebral. Several sulci divide the cerebrum into 5 lobes. The central sulcus divides the frontal lobe from the parietal lobe. The parietal occipital sulcus separates the parietal lobe from the occipital lobe. The deep lateral sulcus outlines the temporal lobe. The 5th lobe is buried deep within the lateral sulcus in the insula.
Each hemisphere has 3 basic regions: a superficial cortex of gray matter, an internal white matter, and the basal nuclei. For the rest of this video, we will focus on the cerebral cortex and its functions. Cerebral cortex is the executive suite of the nervous system. It is where the conscious mind is found. It is composed of gray matter, neuron cell bodies, dendrites, associated glia, and blood vessels. It is only about 2 to 4 millimeters thick and accounts for about 40% of brain mass. There are 3 types of functional areas in the cortex: motor, sensory, and association. None of these areas act alone. Conscious behavior involves the entire cortex in one way or another.
The motor areas control voluntary movement and lie in the posterior part of the frontal lobes. The primary motor cortex located in the precentral gyrus of the frontal lobe of each hemisphere. The premotor cortex is anterior to the precentral gyrus in the frontal lobe. This region controls learned motor skills of repetitious or patterned nature. For example, playing a piano or typing. You can think of this area as our storage bank for skilled motor activities. The Broca's area lies anterior to the inferior region of the premotor area. This area is involved in speech production. The frontal eye field, located in and anterior to the premotor cortex, and it is superior to the Broca's area. A homeostatic imbalance in this area can paralyze the body's muscles that are controlled by those areas. Damage can lead to loss of motor skills in that region, but ability to perform movements is not hindered. For example, if the premotor area controlling your fingers during typing were damaged, you could still move your fingers, but not with the same speed as before.
The sensory areas, which are drawn here in blue, are concerned with the conscious awareness of sensation. They occur in the parietal, insular, temporal, and occipital lobes. The primary somatosensory cortex is found in the post-central gyrus of the parietal lobe, posterior to the primary motor cortex. Neurons in this gyrus receives information from general sensory receptors in the skin and from proprioceptors in skeletal muscles, joints, and tendons. The somatosensory association cortex lies posterior to the primary somatosensory cortex. Its function is to integrate sensory input like temperature or pressure and relate to it via the primary somatosensory cortex to produce an understanding of the object that is being felt. This can include its size or texture. Imagine placing your hand in your pocket. The somatosensory association cortex draws on past sensory experiences to let you perceive the objects you feel as keys or money. The primary visual cortex, located in the posterior tip of the occipital lobe, most, however, is buried deep in the calcarine sulcus in the medial aspect in the occipital lobe. This is the largest of all sensory areas. This area receives visual information that originates on the retina of the eye. The visual association area surrounds the primary visual cortex and covers the occipital lobe. This area uses past visual experiences to interpret visual stimuli. This enables us to recognize a person's face and appreciate what we are seeing. Think of this area as our seeing area. The auditory areas located in the superior margin of the temporal lobe abutting the lateral sulcus. Sound energy excites the hearing receptors of the inner ear, causing impulses to transmit to the primary auditory cortex, where they are interpreted as pitch, loudness, and location. Memories of sound heard in the past are stored in the auditory association area for reference. The olfactory cortex, located in the medial aspect of the temporal lobe, in the piriform lobe that is dominated by the sulcus. Fibers from the smell receptors in the nasal cavities send impulses along the olfactory tracts that are relayed to the olfactory cortices. The outcome is a conscious awareness of different odors.
The next series of structures which are going to be discussed are internal, so they will not be represented on our model.
Olfactory cortex, located in the medial aspect of the temporal lobe, in the piriform lobe that is dominated by the sulcus. Fibers from the smell receptors in the nasal cavities send impulses along the olfactory tracts that are relayed to the olfactory cortices. The outcome is a conscious awareness of different odors. The gustatory cortex. This region is involved in the perception of taste stimuli. It is located in the insula deep to the temporal lobe. The visceral sensory area, located posteriorly to the gustatory cortex and is involved in visceral sensations. For example, full bladder or upset stomach. The vestibular cortex is responsible for conscious awareness of balance. It is located in the posterior part of the insula and adjacent to the parietal cortex. Homeostatic imbalances, damage to the primary visual cortex area can result in functional blindness.
Multimodal association areas receive inputs from multiple senses and sending outputs to multiple areas. This area allows us to give meaning to information received. The anterior association area, found in the frontal lobe, is also called the prefrontal cortex area and is the most complex. It is involved with our cognition, recall, and personality. It also contains working memory. Posterior association area, found in parts of the temporal, parietal, and occipital lobes. This area helps us recognize patterns, faces, localizing us and our surroundings in space, and understanding a different language. Limbic association area. This area includes the cingulate gyrus, the parahippocampal gyrus, and the hippocampus. It gives us emotional impact that makes a scene important to us. Homeostatic imbalances such as lesions or tumors of the association area can cause mental and personality disorders that include loss of judgment, attentiveness, and inhibitions.
Pictured on our model, Patrick, we have the external parts of the cerebrum, and what you can see here are the motor areas pictured in red. We have the primary motor cortex, we have the premotor cortex, we have Broca's area, and the frontal eye field. In blue, we have the sensory areas, the primary somatosensory cortex, the primary visual cortex, then the visual association area, and the somatosensory association area. And here, in this blue, we have the primary auditory cortex and the auditory association area. In green, we have the multimodal association areas. The anterior and the posterior, the limbic association area, is internal. So this is the cerebrum. You've heard about its functions. Thank you to Patrick, our model.